sponsoring all of Dallas Startup Week, the entire week. Bella Wood, Touch Titans, Dev Mountain, Circus. Is it Circus or Circles?
Circles.
Circles. That's going to debate in Dell. We're going to do Credos. And many, many more, especially Boxer property, which my friend Doug over here is going to talk about.
Yep. So, first off, I just want to say that Boxer Property is really happy to host Dallas Startup Week this week and have many sessions held here on the 20th floor of 1910 Pacific. We have 36 buildings throughout Dallas, about 6 to 10 of which have work style suites, which are executive co-working environments that are perfect for startups. A lot of shared amenities, things like that, which you can check out back at our table over here. But I especially want to mention that if anybody here is interested in work style spaces, taking a tour at any point, we have a great exclusive deal for Dallas startup attendees only, and that deal is 6 free months of rent on just a 1-year term or greater. So it's a great opportunity to rent office space, whether it's your first one or looking to expand or get into another environment more formal with some great space and have access to all of our work style buildings by leasing in just one of them. It's a great way to expand your business. All right, thank you guys.
Awesome.
Thank
Thanks.
you. So, of course, I'm going to give these formal introductions, but unless you've been living under a rock, I don't know if you don't know about Danielle. Danielle is an icon in the Dallas startup community. I'm not just saying that because she paid me, but she really is. She was formerly at the DBJ, started a tech flash newsletter, which was one of the first ones in the major publications to cover the Dallas startup scene and technology scene. She's been pioneering the startup community for many years now, and and now she's most recently the managing editor at D Magazine.
DCEO.
DCEO.
Part of D
Part
Magazine.
of D Magazine, which is a big magazine. Yeah. Everyone knows. Brad is the CEO of Ustream. Thank you for coming, Brad. Really appreciate you. Which sold to IBM, correct? Ustream is live stream video, and you guys have covered things like Barack Obama and a couple of celebrities, like Hillary Clinton, John Edwards, the Plain White Tees, and some other ones like Tori Amos. There we go. So I like Tori Amos. Everyone's I do. You also went to West Point, something that not a lot of people know unless you go to. Anything else that you would like to add about yourself?
Yeah, I'm from Texas.
Yeah, you are a Texas boy. So thank you for coming very much. Very, very proud of you making it. So one thing that we're really emphasizing here is start here, exit here. So even, especially in Dallas, we have so many opportunities to start here, but people think that they need to move on to make a big exit. Even though Brad's not from Dallas per se, he is from Texas. He started here and he did exit here. So he's a good, kind of, just say yes.
Just agree.
Yeah, but good example. And you can clarify.
Yeah.
We'll go through them.
So, without further ado, Danielle.
Thank you, Paula. She's so nice. Isn't she nice? So Brad, thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it. We have a nice little intimate group here, so hopefully get some great chatter going on as we go on. But I want to actually start from the beginning because I don't know how many people know Brad's full story. So I want to start all the way back from when Ustream was just, you weren't doing anything with Ustream. It was just an idea, a thought. So let's start at the genesis. How far back do we go, and when did this thought enter your mind?
The thought to start an internet company, or the thought to start Ustream specifically?
Well, let's do both.
Does anybody remember back in the days when there were bulletin board systems? Anybody old enough to be a geek? I know you're old enough, Ryan. But before the internet was around, for those who don't know what a bulletin board system, you used to call into people's computers with a modem to call directly into one. And so I did that at a very young age. Come on in. We need more people. We have plenty of room, I mean. So I started a bulletin board system like at age 11 to 13 to 12. And so my dad was an early adopter, and I was a self-taught programmer, and I was always into technology at that point. And I knew I always wanted to do something in tech at some point. Then I went to West Point, which is a military school. I had to go in the Army for 5 years. I graduated from West Point in June of 2001, so like literally right before September 11th. So it was a very busy time, obviously, in the military, and I did that. I'm very proud to have done that. And when I got out of the military, I didn't exactly know what I wanted to do. And I was able to get in with the Perot family here locally, Ross Perot and his son Ross Jr., and work for one of their companies called Hillwood, which is a real estate development company. Nothing to do with tech at all. Yeah. But what was cool about it, what I enjoyed about it was I would, from a man, just like I had no corporate experience. Like, so, I mean, it's hard. When you get in the military, it's actually kind of hard to get a job because your skill set, driving a tank doesn't exactly translate to anything else in the normal world. Or at least most people don't think it does. And so but the Perot family hire a lot of veterans, and I did real estate development. And what I enjoyed about it is on the one minute I could be talking to the mayor of Dallas, the next minute I was talking to an engineering firm about how to design the neighborhood, the water and the sewers. Then the next minute I was talking to the landscape people around what kind of flowers we were going to choose in the front. And then 2 minutes later I was talking to a guy in a dozer, telling him to save a certain tree because I didn't want to lose that tree. So it was a really interesting experience. And then the real estate market was starting to tank. And I knew I wanted to get into tech, some form or fashion. And I started a previous tech company while I was in the Army with a group of guys. We got back together, and the original genesis for what we do, which today Ustream really is a full-service video platform, primarily for media companies and enterprises. But the original genesis came from that experience in the military that I had, and trying to help soldiers and sailors, communicate. They were missing their kid's wedding or their daughter's graduation, or they were missing, when I missed the Super Bowl because there wasn't. This is all early video, and so we wanted to build a technology that could solve that problem, and ultimately grew into what it grew into.
So you now have the idea. What steps did you take early on to get it started? I'm assuming there was some early investment money that had to come into play here just to launch. Start us, baby steps. Where did you go after the idea?
We initially just with credit cards of our own. I happened to have the largest credit limit, which was $15,000 at the time, and so most of it went on my credit card originally. And then we what happened and sort of got lucky, and this does not happen very often, I don't think, in Dallas, but when I left the Perots, I went to Ross Jr. and told him I had this idea and I was gonna take a swing at it, and literally he gave me a $300,000 check as I quit from Hillwood, and so that's not the normal initial capital story. I had a Ford pickup truck, and I took that money. I didn't buy a car with it. I sold my Ford pickup truck, bought a little car, and drove it to California, and that was our initial capital. Then we ultimately raised, and this was before 2007, 2008. The term accelerator was not even in any kind of vocabulary. Angel funds were sort of scarce. Mostly what you would raise back then were traditional, either your friends and family or just really rich guys. And so we did a lot of that from a lot of really rich guys in the Silicon Valley and some here. And then we raised more traditional rounds later on.
So you get this big fat check, and now you have the funds to do this. Tell me how you get the team. I mean, we're talking early stage, getting this all the pieces together. And you just mentioned you got some Silicon Valley funding too. I mean, walk us through some of these, pulling these different, threads to bring all the pieces together.
And I'm assuming there's other entrepreneurs in the room. Starting a company's just crazy. And I look back in the early days. And where my company is now, when we exited, we had over 200 people. We're going to be 600 here very shortly. And it's funny. I look back at that time, and it's like controlled chaos in my mind. And I think one of the things that I've seen resonate repeatedly with startup founders that have been successful, and startups that have been successful, they have a crazy. Their ability to execute is almost better than their ability to think strategically. What I mean by that is they're real good at just sort of going and making decisions and moving fast and aggressively and staying tenacious, probably more so than they are about have some sort of strategic plan. So we kind of knew what we wanted to do. We wanted to do a video thing, but what we really were doing was just going, and we're just sort of following either where the money was or where the users were. The analogy I use is like, you go up to a stop sign, you either go left or you go right, and you choose a direction, you go, and you keep doing that. And I've seen that repeatedly. So in the early days, it was just a lot of just, we need this, what do we need? Okay, go this way, we need to go this way. And you're sort of, you have a general idea, but you're guiding it through a series of just very aggressive and very tenacious and decisions that are decisive. I've advised companies. I've invested in startups. I've been around tons of startups, and what I tend to see the ones that aren't as successful is they almost overthink things, and don't make decisions and don't just do what needs to happen. At the end of the day, it's about building your product. It's about the customer. It's about watching the data. And some startups, I think, it's not drinking coffee. It's not going to, no offense, not going to events like this. I mean, it's hard work. But you know what I'm saying? It's building a business is hard, and it's long hours, and so I don't know if I answered your question or not. But.
Gotcha. So tell me about, your headquarters is not here, but you're from here. So tell me about that choice because a lot of the debate that we talk about today is, why are we not keeping the startups here? Now, granted, back then it was a different story than it is today. But let's go back when you were starting up. Why choose San Francisco? And you had the Hillwood connection here. You had a big fat check from here. What took you to San Francisco?
Yeah, I think it is a little bit tough I'll tell you the answer, but it is tough to compare back then, 2007 to now. 'Cause I do think they are different. We're in a different place in terms of starting companies and entrepreneurship and fundraising, even in Dallas, as much as we like to complain about it. Because I have a company here in Dallas as well that we raised money for, and it certainly wasn't easy. And another different company. Back then though, it was real simple. And again, I was in tech, or I knew tech, but I hadn't started an internet company before. But I knew Yahoo was there, I knew Facebook was there, I knew Google was there, and I just looked at the list, and I'm like, well, there's something going on here. And back then, the best venture capitalists, the biggest venture capitalists in the world they're literally on one street back then, Sand Hill Road. You could literally go one meeting and walk, one meeting and walk, one meeting and walk. It's unbelievable. And we knew talent was there, and everything. There was just a lot of momentum. It felt like the gold rush to me a little bit back in the day. And so I didn't have I grew up in Granbury, Texas, and it's not like I had a ton of connections here. I came from a real estate company, and so in the tech community, it's not like I knew a lot of people. I later got to know Cuban, but that was like much later, in the history of the company. And so it was that's where I felt like it was at. Now today, certainly it's not as easy to fundraise here as it is in Silicon Valley or maybe even Austin, but it is a very different thing than what it was back then. There weren't accelerators, there weren't actual funds. We can always want more capital, but access to things on the internet, access to blogs like Ryan writes, that stuff just was not out there. Advice and whatnot. Term sheets that you can get for free, that have good terms. And so it was a different thing, and that's where all the knowledge was felt like it was kept, and I needed that knowledge, and so I had to go there.
So then you start up the company, immediately start getting some customer adoption there, but you start to see the model shift. Tell me a little bit about going in, what you were expecting to build, and then, like you said, as a startup, you were just following the path, following where it took you, and your model did shift. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it was the most stressful period of my life. The early days of Ustream, for those who don't know it was what inspired us, to do it from a tech platform. And YouTube, I believe, had just sold. In the early days, we literally put Chad and Steve's faces on our desk as inspiration from the YouTube guys. And they built a platform that was obviously based on video on demand, and really a cultural phenomenon. And we wanted to do something similar with live. And so we were consumer property We would do, Charlie Sheen went crazy on Ustream. We did a ton of celebrity stuff. We did Obama's inauguration. His victory speech was official victory speech was powered by us. All sorts of just to all the stuff you see on Periscope today. We were doing all that years ago, and I know Mark knows this. But what's interesting, and so in 2011, 2012, and we were Alexa top 100 site, so we were just doing 60 million uniques a month or something like that. And then what happened was to build it. It was an ad-based model. To build an ad-based, especially for video, which back then video was even more expensive than it is now. It was very expensive for us to do. You needed scale, like even Twitter struggles at the scale Twitter has to monetize. And so we reached a point in the business where I either had to go compete head to head with YouTube and raise a lot more money. We'd already raised a lot of money, or I had to go buy content, which I'm not the biggest believer in that concept. Unless you're like Netflix, and they had a whole reason why I believe that, but it just hasn't worked typically for video platforms. Or what I did some test with as an enterprise company, and the test proved out, and ultimately what I did in 2012 is I went to our board and I said, look, I'm just going to pivot the whole business model to become an enterprise SaaS business to where we are today, which is most of my business actually comes from like internal streaming. We power massive corporations, internal town halls, internal training, internal sales training. Most people don't know this. They pay a lot of money. It's high margin. We went from about a 45% gross margin business to an 82% gross margin business right now. And so in an environment where these Series C, these bigger companies, unless you're like showing that really next high level of growth, you'll have trouble fundraising. And so I didn't have to fundraise again. I essentially turned my company profitable at 250 people, which is unheard of in video, on a $40 million revenue run rate. And then what was challenged about that was just internally. It wasn't that bad in the market, but like internally, just even though my company wasn't that big, we had to lay off a lot of people. I had to change skill sets. I fired my whole management team. So that part is what I mean by from our stress of leading an organization through a complete change. Where on the one hand, we were used to go, yeah, let's go save the world and go, be a part of the Arab Spring and go. Putin attacked us, and the Russians were attacking us because we were getting all these streams out of Russia. Now people could rally around that to then saying, hey, why don't we go do an internal stream for Cisco? And so I had to change. I didn't change all the engineers, but I almost changed everything, and that was I had a lot of sleepless nights for sure.
So it's a good segue into your growth and how you were able to get to that point to, where you're able to even do that. So a lot of startups, they get going, they hit kind of a plateau. Tell me about how you kept that increase in growth, the momentum going, what it took or what certain steps you did to make that happen, and how you kept that ball rolling.
Well, we plateaued. We definitely plateaued. And so if you look at our growth curves, it was like this, and then it just went plateaued and maybe even started going down. And so I think every startup reaches it. Those were some of the hardest days of our lives. I think from what the decision we made is I think, as I mentioned, is I decided to completely change the business at that point. We had opportunities to sell the company earlier. We didn't take them, and for a variety of reasons, we didn't do it. And so we literally, when we hit the plateau, one thing you can do is go try to change the trajectory, which is hard. Facebook actually, believe it or not, went through you wouldn't think Facebook, they were actually growing in, I think it was like 2008, and then they hit a plateau for 3 straight months. They had stagnant user growth. What they did is they put a team together, like a tiger team, and they just like a growth team, and they just hacked their way to find the next trajectory. The decision I made, which was not to do, we tried some of that stuff and it wasn't working, was literally to go where our growth was, which was on the enterprise side. So it was interesting because at 60 million uniques, we had an ad business that was 10 million or I can't remember what it was, 10 million or $12 million, $15 million in ad revenue, and then in 8 months, I would already, with enterprise SaaS, I'd already almost passed that number with 8 months worth of work with a small team dedicated to it. So what I chose to do is I followed where our growth was, rather than fight where the growth was not and try to fix it. I just went where it was. I felt it was a path of least resistance. It was higher quality revenue for us because we'd already raised a lot, and the fact that I could churn so much money back into the business to keep it running through that revenue growth. And what we ultimately did when I exited, we were on almost a $40 million run rate. Basically, my ad revenue, I shifted. We never had a decline in year-over-year revenue at all, but ad revenue went down and SaaS revenue went up. So I almost had 2 years where I was shifting my revenue type, and it's still had growth overall, but the mix, I completely changed the mix of our revenue streams during that period. So that was a decision that we made.
So tell me a little bit about before. I know now your numbers are probably a little bit more private than what they were before you got acquired, but right before acquisition, give me an idea of scope. How big did you become? What did your numbers look like before this IBM thing even came up? What were you looking at?
Like which numbers? Like revenue numbers?
Revenue, employees. How big did you get?
We were 200 something plus or minus employees globally. We're headquarters still are out of San Francisco. We had a big office in Budapest, really cool office in Budapest. In fact, we're the biggest internet exit ever in Hungary, which was kind of cool. We had an office in Korea and an office in Tokyo, and then we had people kind of scattered in other places. We were on about a $40 million run rate in terms of revenue, profitable, not much, but we're profitable. And we have probably 5,000, had at the time 5,000 paying customers of various size and scale. Some of the biggest companies in the world were paying us lots of money to small, medium-sized businesses. And then we have on our free platform, we probably have 3 million, 4 million at the time actual broadcasters. And then, we would do 40 million uniques a month, something like that at the exit. And
how did you initially...
But through embeds and stuff on the uniques.
Gotcha. So how did you initially get in contact? How did IBM this even start? Where did the conversation start? Was it you? Was it them? How did this all kind of the initial contact, how did that happen?
It was funny is there's a guy, and I don't know Ryan knows him, named Ted Wang in Silicon Valley. Ted is he was one of the very first person I got very lucky and met. Ted was Facebook's lawyer, Twitter's lawyer, Dropbox's lawyer, you name it, every cool consumer property he was their lawyer for. He's a really good lawyer. And not to promote another lawyer, you don't want to use Ted Wang, but the point I'm telling you, he told me something. He said companies are bought, they're not sold, and I 100% believe that. Now sometimes they are sold, but it's like winning the lotto. And so we started building relationships with companies that we thought could eventually buy us, and try to do business development relationships and partnerships, because that's how it starts. They got to get comfortable with you, especially bigger companies. When they need to know you, they know the team, they know the tech. And so we did that with a bunch of companies. We did some partnerships, and with IBM we had a partnership to be in some of their new platforms that they were launching. Got to know us, got to know my tech team, and they started. It's like a dance. They're kind of dancing with you a little bit. You're kind of dancing back, but you don't want to dance too close yet. So you're kind of So we played all those weird little games, but ultimately they were just very blunt about it. They said, look, we're not in video. IBM actually, believe it or not, had 0 video assets at all. This is a company that has 400,000 employees, probably still the #1 enterprise company in the world. They throw off $5 billion in EBITDA a quarter. It's a massive company. They had, and they're making, I should say IBM is making big plays in cognitive, and you heard of Watson, and their data is everything. And the largest data source on the internet is video. 60 to 70% of all internet traffic is video. People don't know this. And IBM had no visibility into that. And so they bought us, and they bought another company at the same time to build this cloud video unit. And we want to do big things in the video space.
And so were you always thinking about acquisition when you were in talks with IBM? Or was that, again, just a strategic relationship that maybe could turn into that? And then also, were you always looking for acquisition as an exit?
You never want to look for acquisition. Well, I mean, there's 3 ways to exit a company. There's only 3 ways. You go out of business, you go public, or you get acquired, right? And hopefully you don't go out of business, but most companies go out of business, and it's really hard to go public. And so the most viable option for return is an acquisition. And I had my moments where I would think about it more, think about it less. One thing I will say, and I've seen this so many times, honestly, if you don't love what you're doing, you're not going to get acquired. I mean, you will. It's like playing again. Sometimes you bet on black and you win. Sometimes you bet on, you play poker and I don't know, blah blah blah, kings and I don't know play poker, but sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. It's what you're gambling, and you will. I mean, you gamble, okay, fine. If you love what you do and actually believe in it, you'll probably figure it out and you may get acquired one day. But it's not the end result. I would have loved to got acquired. I would love money, I love the whatever that comes with that. But if you didn't love what you're doing, I could have done this for 20 or 30 years. I don't like to travel back and forth necessarily, but I genuinely love the video space. And so would never. If someone's thinking about when I've invested, I've never asked about an exit strategy. Like, who cares? Go love what you do. Go love your customers. Go really get inside the mind of the customer, get in their hearts of the customers and what they want, and go build things for them. And then that's how you do it. Because if you're looking for the exit all the time, you're not going to put in the effort, and you're going to cut corners and make short-term decisions. That being said, especially as a CEO, you are the chief everything: sales officer, product officer, evangelist. You're the chief exploration officer, so you got to explore partnerships, new employees, and acquisitions. And that's just the name of the game, because investors, it's not charity. They at some point want their money back. And so, what we did, we did partnerships. We wouldn't do partnerships just to do it to get acquired. It had to make sense. Otherwise, it wouldn't work anyways, because it doesn't make sense. It's not going to work for them. It's not going to work for you. And they're not going to acquire you. And you do that smartly and intelligently. And if it works out, great. If it doesn't, then you love what you're doing. You're responsible. You build a good business, and you can do it forever.
So you mentioned that you had a couple other companies that had tried to acquire you before, and you didn't take those offers. You did take IBM. Tell us about how you go about picking the right person that you want to, I guess, sell to.
Well, the early ones, we passed on. Actually, one early we passed on. It just felt like it was too early. We felt like we could make it bigger. We had one that was very close, and they passed on us, and I'll tell you what it is. In 2011, Sony actually approached us to buy us. And went through all the diligence. They were going to pay even more than I sold the company for recently. Everything was done, and we negotiated the term sheet. And the way this works is you negotiate all the upfront term sheet, and then you sign the term sheet, and then you go through more diligence, and then docs, and then you sell, final docs, closing docs, and everything. So we went through. We were negotiating the term sheet. Took like a week, all the terms, or maybe 2 weeks, and they were supposed to sign it on like a Tuesday, or no, on a Thursday. The CEO had to sign it, or somebody EVP or something had to sign it. On Tuesday before they were Tuesday before the Thursday when they were going to sign it was the Japanese earthquake. And the tsunami that followed. And so ultimately what happened was, so when that happened, obviously Sony's headquartered out of Japan. Japan was in disarray. We had a big presence in Japan. And they told us, hey, look, we're still going to do it, but everything going on, the CEO's traveling, and what ended up happening after a couple weeks, they just finally said, look, there's just too much going on right now. And Sony was in some trouble at that point. So that we did not do that deal. We made some mistakes around that, how we communicate that as well. We can talk about, but we and then but for IBM, what I liked about them, we had other offers this time too. One, they were going to pay the most money, so that's pretty good criteria. But two, I actually liked the people. So the people I was interacting with when I was the other two companies that we were talking to, I actually liked the people. I was like, I I don't want to work here. And if I don't want to work here, my employees, because it really hits you. After I signed the dotted line, it's one thing for the founders, they're going to do very well. You got hundreds of people's lives that are, the deer in the headlights look when you tell them that you sold in your company. That sounds easy. It is not easy to look a bunch of people in the eyes and go, guess what, guys? All that stuff I've been saying, now we're going to go do it with this company. And then all the questions come out, and they're fearful of their jobs. There's been layoffs, and so I knew that was coming, and so I wanted to make sure it was a place that I felt like would be someplace that I would want to work. And as big as IBM is, it's actually a really cool company. They're being very aggressive in cloud in the space that I believe in. And they believe in us. And so it's not like they had other video assets to like kind of cobble us into. I mean, they know nothing about video. So they're like, well, what do you guys think? And we're like, we want to go this way. And they're like, all right, let's go. I mean, so that's kind of cool. And ultimately is just what my gut, my heart told me was the right thing for the company.
So tell me a little bit about, I guess, where you're headed now. So now you are a part of a global company that's doing really big things, and sounds like you have a lot of freedom based on what you just said. So tell me what we should, what you can say now that you're part of IBM, what we should expect out of you guys.
So, and I somewhat talk generically, but video is the most powerful medium in the world. And it's not even so much that you can see the video, pictures you can see, but it's that you can actually feel it. And it doesn't matter if it's a movie, there's something about it, it creates emotion in your body. It's your kid's graduation, there's emotion in their body. When I watched my favorite moment on YouTube ever, we powered the Mars rover landing for NASA, Curiosity, I think was the name was the rover. And watching that live and experiencing it with the world was just like, almost made me cry. We had the SpaceX stuff last week, and I got that same kind of, not as big, but kind of same chills when they landed the rocket. We did the Tesla launch a couple of weeks ago and listened to Elon talk about the future of electric cars. All the way to what was the thing where you pour the ice bucket thing on your head? There's a reason video is powerful. And what IBM is doing, what I'm doing with them, what gets me so excited is we want to take that same emotion and be the technology layer, be the platform. But then they have this thing called Watson, which is one of the smartest cognitive data points or cognitive supercomputing capabilities in the world, and they're exposing it to the world. And it's pulling in all these different data sources. And they just spent $2 billion, I think that's public, for the weather company just to get the weather data points. And what's going to start happening, you see what's happening in video. Of course, everybody knows what Facebook's doing video. You can't go through your timeline. I can tell you a funny story about how they thought I was an idiot for doing some of the stuff they're doing now. Back then, sidebar conversation over beer or something, but they, but to Twitter's doing video, and of course, I live under a rock and I'll be using Netflix or HBO now, so that stuff's all great. But what starts getting really cool is you start thinking about police cams and all the challenges you've seen in some of these cities. And a police officer, and again, some of this is actually kind of scary, but a police officer's walking up to a scene, and it's automatically doing live facial recognition of you, and it goes back in his ear and says, I'm joking, but you're a convicted felon, you're a high-risk convicted felon, you're likely armed. Shouldn't a police officer know that information? Or it hears gunshots in the background automatically because it's monitoring his feed. It knows that that's probably a shotgun based on the noise acoustics, or a 9mm, and there was actually two of them. There were two other shots that they knew that was not the officers. Either the officers were automatically dispatching, police. Or in Texas, I was gone. Didn't it just hail here somewhere? So okay, so they send out. So rather than send an adjuster out to your house and they get up on your roof, and if everybody's ever had a new roof, it's the stupidest thing in the world. The guy gets on your roof, he draws circles on the dots, and then he counts the number of dots, and that's like determines if you get on your roof or not. It blows my mind. What they're going to do, what will happen is they'll send up a drone over neighborhoods that are high likelihood. They know exactly where the hailstorm happened. They'll just fly the drone around, and if they'll know if it's their house, look at it, they'll analyze the video image. It'll all happen in real time, or it could be or after the fact. They'll know based on the algorithms, and it'll get smarter if it actually had hail damage. And they'll just send you a check in the mail and go tell you you're getting a roof. And they saved a ton of money on labor and everything else. So video to things like, 1% of all warehouse sales are 1% of companies like Walmart lose 1% of their distribution revenue from people stealing stuff. But if you use video, you can do facial recognition, you can monitor heart rates, you can use heat, you can see if people are getting hot, people send off, cues. You can actually know if they're actually in the process of stealing something. So there's a million of these things like this that video can play into. I mean, they're putting video, and people laugh. The Samsung put a video camera inside some of their new refrigerators. You laugh at that. I think that's actually pretty cool because now you can see if you actually need milk or not, because that happens to me all the time. And there's other ways to do it, but video. So that's where it's going. Telemedicine. I got sick in San Francisco a while back, and I still stay in a hotel. I don't have a place. And I was sick. And I did not want to leave the hotel room. And I called a little doctor on my phone, and they talked to me. It's amazing. And video and IBM will play in all of these parts, and they can do it on a global scale.
So I'm going to ask you one last question so we can leave a few minutes for any audience questions. But I do have a question for you, just because you've been in the community since before we really had any momentum in the startup community, to see what it's come to now, which it's still working. It's still trying to get the ball fully moving. Tell me a little bit about your take on, if you could compare what was available in the startup community when you first started to what you're seeing now, and even what you're seeing maybe even based on this week.
So compare Dallas back then to Dallas now, or
Yes.
compare San Francisco to Dallas?
Well, I don't think it's fair to compare San Francisco to Dallas.
Or back then.
I think it's a little different story.
back then to now.
Well, you could
could
compare, just the general face of Dallas and what it faces from back then to now.
Well, I will say in San Francisco, it is not unusual, and this happened all the time. We would just you go pitch a guy and they hand you a $50,000 check, and they say, "Send me the paperwork." So it is a different thing that I wouldn't compare it, and we shouldn't compare. It's a different city. I think it's from what I could tell, and many of you are closer to the scene than I am. I think it's certainly gotten better. I mean, you have things like Tech Wildcatters. You have Startup Week, which this stuff didn't happen, in 07, 08, 09. You had some exits for some companies locally. Some of them have been big. SoftLayer being, I don't know if it's the biggest, but certainly one of the biggest. You have some verticals, or it feels like Dallas is starting to get some traction in. And so I think there's a lot of things happening. There's a lot of people who are wanting this to be, and certainly you look down to Austin, and there's the jealousy thing, that the fact that they have an emerging sort of market that's respected. I think that from what I can tell, having just went through a company to try to raise here, it's still very hard. There's no doubt about it. Dallas is unique in that you've got 3 universities, however many universities here, and not like one university like Stanford, that's sort of the dominant one in Silicon Valley, or maybe it's UT in Austin. You have several major cities that are sort of spread out, and everybody's spread out in general. You have a investor base who has gotten a lot better, but still it's old family money, and it's oil money, and and this internet thing, and so but again, it's gotten better. And it seems, what I'm hearing, you can still get checks that are on the smaller size. I was talking to Ryan earlier. It sounds like it's still hard to get $5 million checks or $2 million checks or $10 million. Some businesses need capital. The good part about all this, though, is that there is a community, there is talent, there are major corporations here that are headquartered here that are putting out talent as well. There's more information on the internet than there ever has been. And you don't need as much money to start a company. When we started Ustream, I had to buy the servers. You can get on AWS of Journal Business in like 2 seconds. That was not the case. And so there's zero reason why companies can't grow at scale to something very large here. The other part about it is, I think in terms of exits, companies are more willing to buy in different locations than they were before. Investors are increasingly more willing to think a little bit more broadly. Now, are you going to get the top Silicon Valley investor to come invest in a company in Dallas? No, probably not, unless you have some connections. Why? It's real simple. They don't want to get on a plane and go to board meetings. And you don't invest in a company with a lot of money and not go to the board meeting in person. It's super. And so, what do we need? I mean, it is we're gonna have to get some more investors here. I don't know all the solution to it. I've always kind of wished Cuban was a little bit more involved, and I'd love to see Lance Crosby invest more locally. But we need we're still missing something. There's no doubt about it. But there's gonna be some great entrepreneurs that are gonna. I mean, it's obstacles. If it was easy, everybody was doing it, right? Someone used to tell me the best real estate deals are the ones with hair on them. Why? Because they're hard to do. That's where you make the most money. Someone's going to figure it out, and there'll be companies that are literally born here, started here, fully exit here, and it's going to be some great entrepreneur, and they'll start putting things on the map. But you can build a company anywhere now. I mean, there's exits happening in foreign countries, and in Europe, and Asia's exploding. Dallas certainly has all the ingredients to do it now, and it just may be a timing thing. And I know there's a lot of cool companies up and coming too.
Perfect. Brad, this has been incredible, but I do want to open this up to you guys, because you guys are the ones who are here, and we really appreciate you coming. Is there any specific questions from the audience? We will take our first one.
So talk about where you live and where you work. Those are very different places. How did that come about?
The way I define it is where I live at certain points in time. So I almost live in two places. So I mean, I live in Aledo, believe it or not, which is like west of Fort Worth, and I travel pretty much every week to Dallas or to San Francisco, and I go back and forth. But I'm also the way I've also I certainly don't like it and enjoy it, but you do get in a little bit of a routine. It's a 3-hour flight. It's a 2-hour time zone difference. If I take the 6 a.m. flight, which I stopped doing, I feel like I'm getting too old for that, but if I take the 6 a.m. flight, I can be in the office by 8:30. Then I would fly back on Thursday nights or fly back on Fridays. Sometimes I would stay over on the weekends, but usually not. And I come back to Texas. Some weeks I'm in New York, or I'm in Dubai, or I'm in Japan, and then I'm in Atlanta. Like next week I'm in Vegas, and then I'm in Atlanta, and then I'm in Budapest. If you want to, as you start getting bigger, these are the things you have. You live on a plane. It's just the trade-off you have to make, and whether it's live on a plane, travel in city to city to get back home, or you go to one place and go back, it doesn't really matter. That's the life I live, and that's part of the trade-off.
Any other questions?
Talking about funding for a person just starting, someone who has an idea, what would be your recommendation for first crowdfunding, something like that?
Yeah, no, I'm a big proponent of crowdfunding. That's another one that was not even available when we started Ustream. People are gonna give you money and not really. You send them a plaque or whatever. Have dinner with you when you're successful, or send them an early product. I mean, pre-sales a product. I mean, shoot, Elon Musk sold his Model 3 and he got like $10 billion in sales in 2 days. And I like to think we had a little bit to do with it because we streamed it. But, get your pre-sale. I mean, absolutely. Why not? I mean, I don't know what your company is. Software companies is a little harder to pre-sell, but certainly physical products you can pre-sell like crazy. I'm a big proponent of that. Fundraising, it doesn't even matter. I mean, I make it sound like it's real easy in Silicon Valley. I'm sort of and we had a couple that felt like they were easy, but it is hard. You have to talk to people. Some entrepreneurs I'll talk to, like, I talked to a couple of people. No, you got to talk to like 50 people. And you got to talk to like one person and ask for 3 other contacts, and talk to one person, ask for 3 other contacts. It is hard to do. It is not fun. It's worse than getting a loan from the bank times 100, because you're gonna hear no. Most, and particularly if you get to like professional investors, they'll do one deal a year, or maybe 2 a year. So it is hard, but you just gotta. I mean, Lance Crosby from Software will tell you he talked to like 70 people, got told no, and then he finally found one. And we just have to. It goes back to tenacity. There's a guy, when I was getting out of the Army, a guy named Greg Ruff, and I only met him once. I'll never forget his name. I was flying back to Dallas. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. And he was an entrepreneur and started a bunch of companies. And he told me a story, and I'll never forget it, and it stayed with me, which was, he said, being in startups is kind of like shooting a basketball. Or in a basketball game. You're going to shoot once, you're going to miss. You're going to shoot once, you're going to miss. But if you just keep shooting the basket, eventually you're going to make it in. And he told me that analogy helped him get through a lot of dark times where he felt like quitting. Most entrepreneurs fail because they quit. in his experience, and which happened to be almost my exact. I mean, I almost quit a million times, not a million, but like at least 2, 3, 4, 5 times. And somehow you just, when your back's against the wall, and I don't recommend it for everybody. Some people will fail, and it's just the nature of the beast. But for me, it was always somehow, that adversity produces something in you and the situation that you find something. There's always a solution. I mean, put men on the moon, for God's sake, right? So there's some solution. And fundraising is the same thing. And as hard as it is here, I fundraise from people here in an industry that I know nothing about, with some people that were, didn't have experience fundraising. We found money. It was just painful. It was very hard. And that's just, and so initially wherever you can get it, is it your friends, is it your family, is it the guy down the street, is it an incubator, is it crowdfunding, if you don't have tons of capital, like now I could probably fundraise easier because I have an exit. If you don't have that luxury, it doesn't matter where the money comes from, just go get the money. And we, candidly, and I don't recommend this for everybody, we did venture debt too. I don't know if is anybody locally doing venture debt here? No, but basically we took a high risk loan out against the business, where if it failed, they would take all the IP. I mean, there are sometimes desperate times call for desperate measures, and it saved the company in the early days. So there's almost always some mechanism, whether it's grants, crowdfunding, angels, super angels, incubators, pre-sell your product. Anything that's legal is probably on the table. And it's not easy. And we can go into more specifics, but tenacity just is number one.
And we had a question over here.
What? Oh, charity? But we certainly didn't do that because it took a long time to get profitable. I honestly don't know much about that. The only example I know is I've seen one startup try it, and I don't know if it happened to him. And then the shoe guy that did that. Toms or whatever they were, Toms. I hate those shoes, but whatever. They just hurt. They hurt my feet. But I honestly, I don't know the answer to that. My personal opinion, philanthropy is great, and being aware of your community is great. The cold hard reality is this is a business, and anything that distracts you from ultimately getting a product to customers that the people are willing to pay you for, somehow you can monetize, is a distraction. And I don't mean that in a mean way. I don't know enough. I don't have a ton of experience in that, and it always felt like a little bit more to me like a marketing gimmick than an actual. And that always kind of bugged me. Is that you're really true to it? Can you really build a business? And then I look at myself as an angel investor. Would I invest in a company that's doing that? Maybe. And there's probably companies that have done it very successfully that I'm not aware of. But I would caution it might seems like a little bit of a distraction. I'm one data point, and I know there's been companies that have done it successfully. So we did not do that. Now what we did do, as we had a company and people, we were very involved with we did do it. We didn't do it in the way like a Tom's did. I thought it was kind of like a marketing campaign. We were very involved in San Francisco. We do cleanup day. There's a problem with needles all around our office. There's so many homeless people. So we do a lot of trash pickup, stuff like that. Clean up your neighborhood day. We've done stuff where we've donated our services to others that really didn't cost us a lot of dollars, that were done on the weekends. We donated. I had a program called Using for Change. It's still going on. Actually, IBM made me kill it, but we had it for a couple of years. It wasn't a nonprofit, but it was an employee-run organization where we donate our services. If you were going to support governments that are open governments, democracies, and stable societies, anything within that that curve, we would donate our services, but it didn't cost us anything. It was just our time. So we did things like that, but we didn't really promote it all that much. It was more for the intrinsic value of bringing the team together and doing something for the community or in the broader community.
And we'll take one last question right here.
My name is Danny Martin. That $300,000 are those same individuals still with you today, even at the acquisition?
Definitely ask for equity. He definitely, I mean, businessman. And then you don't want free. I mean, they would never. If an investor's giving you free money, it's either usually the government or it's customers paying up front or it's crowdsourcing, things like that. But most people, if they're actually going to hand you a check, they're going to want equity. And he definitely got equity from Eastern. In terms of splitting up the equity, that's always the hardest conversation. My advice, what I tell people, is the sooner you can have those conversations, the better, because the longer you wait, it causes so many issues. And all should not be equal. Because what ends up happening is usually one person becomes the CEO, one person becomes like the main person leading the organization or the main tech guy. And if you have, I don't know how many founders you would have, but if you have 2, 3, 4 founders, you can't have the same equity. And the sooner you can have that conversation earlier on roles, it's just the nature of the beast. And it's always a very tough and uncomfortable conversation. We waited too long, and it would turn out to be just a very, very, very uncomfortable situation. Because when it happens, you're like, I'm doing all the work, and you got the same equity, and gosh, I'm bringing all the value. You may not be working as hard, or maybe you are working as hard, but you're just not. It's a slice of the business. It's really hard. There's actually some good tools on the internet. I don't know. Do you know the name websites of those tools, Brian? By chance, I'm calling you out, but there's some actually pretty cool tools where you actually do some equity calculators based on the role. There's no perfect answer, but there are some rules of thumbs that some of the major VCs and some of the major accelerators use. But equal is I don't recommend, particularly for more than a couple founders. If it's 2, you maybe, and it's like you and the CTO, maybe. I will say I didn't start off as our CEO. I took over in 2011, we had equal, me and him, but it was both of us. But being in charge and the pressures, as much as I thought I felt them, until you're actually in charge, you can't even describe it. So, what was my age? At that time, well, when we started the company, I think I was like 27, something like that. And then so 2 of the founders were still at the company when we exited. Me and my CTO are still there, and one had moved on.
All right. Well, I just want to thank Brad.
Ron has a question.
Oh.
It's not a question, it's the answer.
Oh, here we go.
There's no Wasserman and Harper. I think he has some founders.
Yeah. It's a very real, good question. It's a very difficult conversations because.
Gone through it, and that's what kind of
Yeah, my personal opinion, I think the CEO should have the highest equity. He has the most responsibility. It's going to be when things burn, they're going to point at him. It's that person's name that's going to get smeared. The CTO in the tech company should probably be second. And if you're a founder and you're the head of BD, no offense to head of BDs, you're great, or VP of BD, but your equity shouldn't be the same as those 2 individuals. My opinion. And there's rules of thumb, and expect it to go down every round. It's always going to go down.
All right, Brad. Thank you again. We really appreciate all the insight. You did a great job. And thank you guys so much for joining us this evening, and we hope you enjoy the rest of Startup Week.
Thanks, everyone.